Hey, we're trying it again. I'm hoping this is now working. I came here a minute ago and it cut me off. The internet just died on me. Oh, I just died in your arms tonight. Hope you're okay. It is. Try that again. Tuesday, the 13th of September. If you're watching live at 3 p.m. If you're watching live, drop me a hey. Drop me an angry face maybe to boost the algorithm. If you know the people that are in the group and you want to invite them along, then please drop them an invitation in the comments. If you're watching on replay, pop me a replay in the comments. So, hey, hello, hope you're all right. It's Heidi. I'm coming at you for day 3 of our 5-day challenge. I'm a little later than planned because of the internet issues. Anyways, hope you're all right. So, day 3 is a little bit, I think it's a little bit less full on than yesterday. Yesterday was a lot of thinking. So yesterday we talked about polyvagal, responses in your central nervous system in response to threat, and what that looks like. And we talked about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, and safe and social. I encourage you to have a think about some reflection time within that, to think about what those look like in your home, what are your most common responses, what that means for your family dynamic, and also what you can remind yourself of to make sure that you're coming to that place of realization with kindness. So you'll see why, as we're going through this together, these things kind of all tie together. Because on Thursday night, myself and Kate are going to come and do a session together on the things that the kind of the top 5 things to prioritize in your home if you're a neurodivergent family. And this is all feeding into that. So what I want to talk about today is a little bit of stuff around gut feeling, right? And it's something we talk about a lot in all spaces, neurodivergent and otherwise. But it's something that actually for neurodivergent people, I think it can be a little more complex. And it can also be one of those things that, depending on what your sensory profile is like, depending on how you feel things in your body, can feel very different for everybody. So I've worked with a few clients, and when I've said, what is your gut telling you? Sometimes they'll say, I don't know how to listen to my gut. I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what that looks like, and like, I think for many of us as neurodivergent people, if we've been in situations where we felt like historically our experiences, our experiences haven't been validated, our voice hasn't been heard, our feelings haven't been acknowledged, and we've been in that space where we felt like we needed to shrink ourselves to fit in with other people. We needed to mask, in essence, whether we did that consciously or not. Can you hear the dog growling at me? Growling. What's the matter with you, growly boy? Then sometimes, this idea of trusting your gut, it's kind of in the same realm as be yourself, and it isn't always that straightforward. So I want to share something with you today. That's something that I used to do a lot in my coaching practice before I worked in advocacy. And I think it's quite a helpful exercise. So it's this idea that a lot of us, when we're coming to understanding our neurotype a little better, I can't see any comments, by the way. Drop me a comment if you can see and hear me. When we're coming to understand our own neurotype a little better, and we're starting to understand what that means for us as adults or as people living in households with people who have different neurotypes and different sensory profiles, I think we quite often go on this bit of a kind of a knowledge finding mission. I know I did. And I was talking to some of the Unstoppable parents yesterday, and they were saying, like, I watch every single webinar. I've read every single book. I've I've autisticed the hell out of this. My special interest is autism. And I think we all do that to a degree. Hey, Paula, I'm so glad you're here to let me know that people can see and hear me. Thank you. It can become a bit of a quest to find the answers. And I'm not saying that you don't want to seek out knowledge and expertise from people who have lived experience or people who are, qualified to share with you things that might help you on your journey. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but I think sometimes we can become a little too outward looking, and especially if we're neurodivergent and we've never really been empowered to really connect and to really trust ourselves and to really be able to hear that inner voice. That sometimes is really difficult to hear over all the noise. So especially if you're ADHD, and or if you've got quite a vocal self-critic, and or if you've got all of that stuff laid on top of you from, you know, all the stuff that you've brought through childhood into adolescence and adulthood with you, it can be really hard to connect to that part of you that is like that inner wisdom, or whatever you want to call it. And depending on your belief system, it will be either a conscience, or an inner wisdom, or like a greater good, or whatever it might be. But that part of you that is you, that when given the opportunity, and when in that safe and social space, and when feeling empowered and safe, that place that you can make good decisions from, or kind of like make fully informed decisions from. Would have been quicker, but two friends live live at the same time. Worst problems to have, I guess. Oh, well, who else is live? I don't know who else is live. So I said it would be 3 o'clock. I said I'd be here. So what I want to share with you is something around that thing, because I think a lot of us have that experience of, we're seeking the answers. And someone said in the Unstoppable Parent group yesterday, and forgive me, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Emma, but I'm not even sure if it was. What happens if you're doing all of this learning, you're doing all of this personal development work, and the answer that's coming back is that you know the answers, and it's the system that's screwed. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. It's the way that things are set up that are tripping us up. Then what do you do? What if you know that? Then what do you do? It was Nicola Ricci. She's here now. Nicola Ricci, hello. So what I want to share with you, the thing that I talk about in some of my trainings, and this idea of, the difference between building a raft and feeling confident to float, right? So I spent a lot of time before I knew that I was neurodivergent being out in the world trying to find out what was wrong with me. Why was my brain broken? How could I fix it? Was I actually an alien? I did all of that stuff. What diagnoses fit best? Tried on different mental health diagnoses. And, I'm not saying that I don't have mental health diagnoses, because I do. And I've talked about this before. The reason I have those is because of unmet need as a neurodivergent person. So I did a lot of self-discovery stuff. I did all of the therapy, like I even trained in a couple of therapy modalities. So, I kind of did the work that was required. But it was always a case of I was looking for answers. I was looking for tools. I was looking for things that I could do that would make things better, right? In essence, I was going to raft building exercises. So I was going to workshops where other people were teaching me how to build a raft so I could float on the lake of life, right? And when I finally discovered my neurodivergence, and when I finally realized that the stories that I'd been telling myself, the things that I thought were true about me were actually not true at all, and that all of this narrative that I had around being broken and something being wrong with me was not accurate. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't broken. I was different to the majority. When that all fell into place, and I realized that actually I've been going to all these raft building workshops because I thought I didn't know how to survive on the lake of life, right? Stick with me. The analogy is a little wobbly, but stick with me. And so in order to kind of like reach the place that I was going to, let's imagine that it was a lake with an island in the middle of it. And I was trying to get to the island of, I don't know, truth, essence, whatever it might be, right? Whatever it might be. I was trying to get to the island in the middle of this lake, the island of safety and bravery and affirmation and validation and no longer being isolated. Maybe there'd be other people on the island that were like me, but I'd been going to the shore and signing up for raft building workshops with people who had never been to that frigging island, didn't even know the island existed, and certainly wouldn't want to visit it, right? And I was going to all these raft building workshops, and they were saying, if you do X, Y, Z, if you meditate in the morning, and if you drink a pint and a half of cold water every morning, and you meditate every morning for 90 minutes, and, you walk for an hour a day, and you journal, now none of these things are not useful. And they're not all useful to all people all of the time. And there isn't a blueprint for getting to that island of self-acceptance, that island of self-compassion, that island of being safe and social. There isn't a blueprint. It's different for everybody. But I was going to these raft building workshops, and they were saying, right, so you put this stick on top of this stick, you tie it together with this, and then you put this underneath it. And it wasn't working. And the relationship I have with that kind of experience of having that moment of realization in relation to that is, I feel like when I knew I was neurodivergent and I started coming from a different place, the island of that non-trauma place on Polyvagal, I forget the name of, safe and social, the island of safe and social. When I came to that realization that I'd been looking for other people to teach me how to build a raft, and that the answers weren't there. And then when I then thought, well, actually, in essence, what I could do is wade into the water, lie on my back, and just see if I could float. That is the difference between living in hypervigilance as a neurodivergent person and living in a place where you can give yourself a bit more time and space to be quiet with things. I went on holiday recently. There is nothing more beautiful than lying in a swimming pool on your back, looking up at the sky, just listening. It's the best thing ever. If you've got a sensory profile like mine, I happen to have that kind of sensory profile. I absolutely adore flotation tanks. I love being in the water. It's one of my favorite things. So it's this thing of, you maybe don't have to be constantly fighting all the time. You maybe have the answers, but because you're not used to and have never experienced or rarely experienced being in that safe and social place, it's almost like you don't even know where to look within yourself for those answers. Tell me if that's making sense. Tell me if that rings true for you. Have you been spending a lot of time going to raft building exercise workshops when actually you could potentially float? Because today's challenge is about that. So today's challenge is around you identifying when historically you have been able to tap into that inner sense of wisdom, that truth, that gut feeling. Now, it feels different for everybody, but it is the place where you float, right? It's a place where gradually you just get on your back and you float, and before you know it, or not even before you know it, gradually over time, you get closer and closer to the island, right? We've all, I hope, had experiences where we've had this sense of this red flag moment. Sometimes it's easier to identify those red flag moments. I had this feeling that something wasn't right. I had this gut feeling. I had this red flag moment and I ignored it. And then afterwards, I wished I hadn't ignored it, or I wish I'd given it more attention. Or we've had those moments where you have this gut feeling, sometimes about people actually, where you meet someone, you're like, my kind of person, right? And you just gel from the beginning. This is how I was with Kate Jones when I met Kate Jones. Like the minute I met her, I was like, oh my God, I've met my wife. Not that way wife, but we joke. So I want you to think about, your exercise for today is to think about, when have you had those experiences? Where is the evidence that you can trust yourself? It might not be a gut feeling necessarily. It might not be a spidey sense. It might be, but it might actually be more cognitive than that. It might be more logical than that. You might actually be able to track the thought process. And when can you identify that times previous to today, you have been able to trust yourself, whether you chose to or not, that you have known something was either right or wrong? And I hate that black and white thinking, but hey, we're autistic, let's go with it. When you have had that sense of, this just feels right, or this just doesn't feel right. Because the reason that I'm asking you about that is because some of the things that I think as neurodivergent people that we fail to do for ourselves is to really tune into that inner wisdom and that inner voice. And if we're spending a lot of time in fight, flight, freeze, or flop, or fawn, we're making it harder for ourselves, not making it harder for ourselves, but it is harder to hear that inner voice, because that inner voice is most clearly heard when you're in safe and social. So I'm not saying tell me when you've been in safe and social. I'm saying think about times when you have really been able to identify a moment when historically you could trust yourself. Because the piece about that is whether you've been able to be in safe and social or not, whether it's somewhere you're familiar with or not, being able to remind yourself or reconnect to that part of you where you do know you can trust yourself is absolutely valuable. Because the more you can do that, and the more you can be in that space and find ways to get to that space, the less time you will feel that you are forced into the other spaces of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and flop. Paula, in reality, instead of teaching us how to do the thing, you provide a space in your courses for us to get to know ourselves and trust in ourselves, which allows us to identify our authenticity. We can draw on this to maintain safe and social more of the time. Boom. There we go. Paula, done it for me. Thank you very much. You might even get a bonus ticket for the draw. So today's task, and I'm going to put a accountability post up, but just bear with me because I've got to go and get Theo from college. So it's going to be when I get back. And I'm also going to have a sleep, but I am going to do it, is for you to have a think about times historically when you have known that your gut was telling you something, regardless of whether you ignored it or paid attention to it. You can expand on that if you want. You can say, you know, I remember I met a person who later turned out to be a complete dick, right? When I first met them, I had a couple of red flag moments. And because historically I have not trusted my gut, because I have been trained not to, right, by my environment, by people who loved me and wanted me to fit in, I ignored those red flags. And afterwards, I thought back and thought, you know what? If I'd listened to my gut, I might have been in a different situation. Like, I can't do the task, but I can do the other equally valuable things. Exactly, Paula. So think about that. When you've had occasions historically, you're looking for evidence, whether you ignore it or not ignoring it, whatever that might be. Yes, Paula. I'm totally okay with you being who you are also. You're looking for evidence of that inner wisdom, that inner essence, that place where you can float, that place where you have had that spidey sense, that gut feeling, that red flag, that moment of that, oh, this feels a bit, or oh, this feels a bit, whatever it might be, or oh, I think this is a bit, or oh, I think this is a bit, whatever that might be. Okay. And it's different for everybody. There's no right or wrong. Okay. But what we're looking for today is evidence that you are a human being and that you have that experience in whatever that looks like for you. And it will be different for everyone. And there'll be some similarities, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, me too. So for me, I do get a kind of like a spidey sense of when I can trust people. I don't always trust that because historically that has not been accurate, because I've not known what I'm looking for when I'm looking and listening to that. I also have got a spidey sense around red flags. I often ignore those. Okay. So I'm not saying that I've got this down. I'm saying that I personally think we do all have within us that essence of that inner wisdom, that truth, that place where we can trust ourselves. You may not be connected with it, and that is okay, right? It's not, this isn't a like, again, this is not a stick to beat yourself with. This is not a chance for you to tell yourself what a horrible human you are. That's not what we're here for. If you're here for that, you're in the wrong place. Go and find, I don't know, Tony Robbins or somebody. But this is about recognizing that there is evidence in your life, in your distant, near, current, past, whatever it might be, that there is a part of you that when you're able to be connected to it, you can trust it. That's what that is. Okay. So today's task is to have some reflection time around the occasions when that has been evidenced in your life. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So your challenge, should you choose to accept it or not, Paula, I'm not the boss of you, do what you like, is to have some reflection, write it down if you want, and I will put you up a accountability post later, a little bit later on. Where have you previously experienced gut feelings? What has that looked like for you? What has that felt like for you? When was that? What did that gut feeling tell you? We're just looking for evidence of it, regardless of what the outcome was. Okay? All right. I'm speaking to your soul. Okay, good. The thing the school say are, Mummy's just having a few niggles about school. No, this is my instincts and I should be listening to them. And that's what this feeds into, because bigger picture stuff, when we're advocating for our children, tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about how this plays out. But when we're advocating for our children, we need to know what our priorities are, what our core values are, what our non-negotiables are, and what we know to be true. And for true for us, true for our family, true for our kids. Okay, so this is me asking you to look for evidence that you have got the ability to know what's true, to know what's right for you, to know what feels good, to identify when you're safe or not safe, to identify when people are safe or not safe, whether you act on it or not, whether you're good at taking their own advice on that or not. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to go and get Theo from college. I'm absolutely freaking knackered. I've overdone it today and I've got so much more to do. But I'm really glad, I am really glad that I got to spend a bit of time with you. If you're watching this on replay and you've made it to the end, there is a keyword to use. The keyword today is, the key phrase is, I like pizza. So if you've made it to the end of the video, type I like pizza to let me know, so that I can make sure that I log that you've watched the whole of this video. Or not. I'm not the boss of you. Right. I'll see you a bit later. Take care. I like pizza.